So we're going to kick off by giving Simon an opportunity just to make a few comments which he was planning to make earlier in his session today. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Neville. My major concern is the employment experience. It's infinitely more powerful and damaging, if it's not right, than anything you may hear from the branding department. You can't spin your way to an employer brand. It's got to be there in the reality. And the most important aspect of that is the working experience itself, particularly in a business that relies on impressing and delivering for the City of London and all the professional services that it needs, is the kind of life that that represents. And is it the sort of life that high top talent at the highest level wants to be? Do you want to be, as a partner in a major firm of professional services, whatever it is, to work the hours that you actually work? Will the next generation that's coming out of university now, how are they wanting to live their lives? Because there are many other pressures on equally talented people who have gone a different way than the extraordinary hours that many senior people in professional services are having to cope with. Anyone with a family the last 15 months has had massive issues over the education of their children, over the need for more space, for where to go afterwards, what the opportunities are. It's a massive family, a human challenge. And if you are working all hours, I don't know what the scores are for very senior people across the area that you represent, Richard. What sort of hours are being worked? Because I suspect that there is another group of equally bright people who are just as keen on earning that sort of money, but also keen on a broader, fuller life. They will, of course, find it at the end of their partnership, and many people who have gone on to great things when they leave the professional services and become more themselves.
Simon, thank you very much. Does the panel have any advice for young talent who felt very isolated from their colleagues, from their teams during the past year and a half almost? Really, in broad terms, people returning to the work environment and maybe associated with whatever you're planning to say, Meirion. Perhaps you could also touch on, there have been good things which we've all learned over, through this experience about in the way that we've worked, and how do we ensure that as we return to work, which is really quite a big topic in the business world at the moment, certainly in professional firms, how do we ensure that we don't lose some of the positive things that have come out of our working experience during the past year?
I do a great deal of coaching, and this coaching has become potentiated and intensified over the last 15 months because of what we're talking about. So I coach managing partners, I coach associates, I coach mid-ranking associates on a kind of progressive track through their careers. And it's interesting to me how their experiences of lockdown have been so dramatically different. Lots of partners I'll speak to will perhaps slightly shamefacedly admit that they've enjoyed lockdown, that they've had more time to spend with their families, as Simon was talking about. They've had a better work-life balance. They have more energy because they're not spending 20% of their day commuting and forcing themselves through crowds in stations and so on. And that's not to be underestimated. On the other hand, there are also more junior people who are perhaps cooped up in relatively small flats, who in many cases have suffered immensely They suffered from the lack of human interaction. They've suffered from the mission creep, finding that they're having to work at all hours of the day. And they've suffered from the lack of mentorship, of just being in the presence of experts from whom they can osmotically absorb insight and experience and information and growth. And so in those respects, it's for those people, I found that it's been immensely challenging. And is going to leave a legacy in many cases that's going to take a long time to be addressed. Now that comes on to another related topic that one of the speakers talked about earlier, which was leadership. And in particular, she referred to OKRs, which is to say, setting longer term objectives, perhaps 1 year or 3 years, but breaking those down into quarterly measurable increments. And one of the firms I've been working with has implemented a program of OKRs to address this very issue of mental health and purpose and well-being in the more junior people in their organizations. So the overall objective is to ensure that everyone is engaged, everyone feels included, everyone is well balanced, everyone feels able to manage their life and their workflow to the extent that they can. But recognize through the quarterly measures and increments that that's not going to happen of its own accord. It has to be actively managed. So there are regular, as it were, non-technical catch-ups where there are just off-the-cuff, impromptu, relaxed conversations. There are regular outside get-togethers. There are regular client feedback exercises where the very point that Simon was clarifying about managing the client's expectations, because of course clients have been so uncertain over the last year. They have wanted reassurance. They have wanted to know that there is someone standing by their side, protecting them. But managing this, and in this case where this process has been applied, I have seen dramatic results and improvement in the way in which those junior people feel that they can affect some agency over their life. I'm recognizing that I'm giving empirical evidence here, that this is an anecdote of one particular firm, but I had to tell it because it seems to accord very closely with the issues that Simon was raising. And perhaps it offers a kind of modus operandi for other firms to address this very, very important issue.
Thanks very much, Meirion. You touched on the question of leadership there, and I wonder whether we could perhaps move on to that, partly in the context of what you and Simon have been talking about in terms of the working experience generally and the challenges that people have been facing, but and recognizing that in dealing with the many issues that you've mentioned and identified, leadership is going to be critical in helping many people in the working environment deal with some of these issues. Now, the question was posed as to the nature of leadership, really, and I think along with that, whether leaders can be trained, whether there are any inherent qualities of leadership that an individual has to have in order to be an effective leader. And of course, there are many, I think it's easy to recognize that there are many different styles of leadership, but in order to be effective, leaders need to exhibit certain qualities. And it might be a different collection of qualities that makes each individual leader very effective, or somewhere along the spectrum of effectiveness, qualities such as passion, resilience, the ability to inspire people to follow them. But I suppose what I'm interested in is whether you feel that recognizing that leaders can improve their skills and become more effective leaders, are there though, in your view, some inherent qualities which an individual has to possess in order to be able to perform a leadership role, or not? Perhaps, Simon, why don't you lead off, and I'd like Richard to go next on that topic, recognizing that the MPF has, of course, for many years served generations of leaders of professional service firms, Richard, and I'm sure you've had the opportunity to observe, a very wide spectrum of leaders. So, Simon, if you could kick us off, and then Richard, and then Meirion, interested in your thoughts as well.
I think an extraordinary wide range of people can, in fact, be good leaders. At the American school I mentioned briefly, I did the strong personality test. I did not come out as my interests did not match those of a great leader. President of a manufacturing concern, I did not score as highly as I did on other, and I was slightly ashamed of that. But I've come to the conclusion that if you can win work, one, if you can win and retain outstanding people, and thirdly, playing to understand yourself so that the things you're good at, including ideas and rule breaking from time to time, but have at your side somebody who compensates for the things you are not that good at. I've always needed a great finance guy at my side, and somebody who can say, "Hang on, Simon, I wouldn't do that if I was you," and really listen to him or her. And I think that's understanding yourself, what you really are good at and what you're not so good at, and go public on it, as I'm doing right now.
I think those are wonderful metrics. The can you bring in work? Can you can you hire and retain great people? And can you understand your areas of strength and areas in which others can complement you? I think, again, thinking about the people who have had greatness thrust upon them, sometimes known as missing the meeting at which you were elected managing partner. That's a bit extreme these days. These days it's more like an election. But there are clearly a lot of people who have found themselves in a leadership role. I think a lot of them really haven't found it easy to separate leadership and management. And maybe calling them managing partner is a problem. We call them firm-wide leader now for that reason, because I think actually at the end of the day, management is often best left to experts. Picking up Simon's third point, your finance guy is there for a reason. It could be your tech person. I actually do go with Neil's view, though, that the people who are most likely to succeed are those who can influence others. And there's a great Sandhurst saying, which is that you can't be a leader without followers. And I think the people who are very successful in our sector are the ones who have the confidence of their fellow partners. Now, the challenge with that can be then groupthink, because if, for example, you get out of alignment with some of the things that matter to your clients, then you may end up in a bad place. But I think mostly professional firms have been very successful. I think the other key point I'd make is around selection, that if you think about a PLC, typically your new leader, your CEO, is selected by a group of Neds who may or may not know the firm that well, who say, perhaps with inspired by investors, we need a new CEO. And there's lots of evidence that says that actually that isn't necessarily then going to be an optimal choice in the majority of cases, because those individuals don't know the firm well enough, the organization well enough to know where to start pressing buttons. One of the biggest strengths of the professional services firms is that people know who their leaders are. They've elected them, and they know where they're good and where they're less good. And I can know of examples for it. I can think of an example where the CEO's job spec was changed after he was elected, because he was elected for the wrong reasons. He just wanted the job title. So they had to find somebody else that they called COO or whatever to do most of the work. So, firms are quite adaptive from that point of view. So I would have said there isn't I think to me, the most important trait is actually this ability to influence and understand and build followership within your firm.
Well, I'm going to take a contrary view just for the sake. And first of all, I think leadership can be taught if you break it down into a series of identifiable components. So I think the ability to communicate unambiguously, perhaps inspiringly, perhaps non-linearly, is the most important aspect of leadership. And with that in mind, there's so much that one can be taught, not least to recognize that everyone else isn't a mind reader and that they don't intrinsically understand what you mean, and things need to be explained. As Barack Obama once said, the only effective measure of good communication is whether I'm understood, not how well I communicate. So being able to ensure that you're understood and ignite, therefore, a common purpose in the sense that collectively people can buy into that. Also, is it two-way? Communication is a transaction. It's not one-way traffic. There has to be a desire to understand the feelings and the views and the beliefs of those that are being communicated with, so that you can develop a meaningful consensus rather than just a kind of tacit, rather agreed following. Secondly, I think there wants to be, allied to that, a very clear direction. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? What are people's contributions going to be? How are those contributions going to be measured? And how are people going to be held to account for all of that? And of course, in a partnership particularly, it's very difficult to enforce that, which again comes back to one of Richard's points about not distinguishing between management and leadership. Leadership is asymmetric, it's non-hierarchical, it's soft. It gets people to want to do things rather than tries to direct people to do things. Now, the more I talk, the more I'm persuading myself that perhaps leadership is more innate than it is developed. But I think that there are certainly traits that can be acquired, and certainly around communication, around planning and implementation, and around learning from mistakes and refreshing and building those insights into the model so that you're continuing to improve, continuing to fine tune. All of these things can be done. And the final thing to say is, one of the best leaders in one of my clients is the receptionist. Because when you walk in, he knows you, he immediately makes you feel at ease. He solves any problems, be it a problem with a projector or arranging a hotel room or organizing a conference room, and you know it's going to be done, and it's utterly reassuring. And as an expression, again, to go back to another point that Simon made, of the intrinsic, deep brand values of that organization, he is one of the most important banner wavers. And the messages that he sends out both to the clients, but to the partners and the associates who work with him, is immensely positive. And if he can be a leader and be a successful leader, then I think there are probably many more who could follow a similar path.
What a great set of thoughts about leadership. But I'm going to pose one last question for some quick final thoughts, and that is on the question of strategy. I'm going to ask a very simple question, and I apologize for the simplicity of it. But what works better, top down or bottom up? Any takers?
Has to be top down to start with. You can't. People react to an idea, and if the idea is, or the problem is, where are we going? But they have to be involved with somebody. The first stage is for the individual leading the place to put that issue on the table. Being honest from the start when you don't know. And how disarming it is when a boss admits that his or her thinking was wrong. What a charming, wonderful thing it is. Sorry, guys, it's not my strength. And I should have realized that. How often do you hear that, and how endearing it is when you do? And I think going public on, we are at a crossroads. We do need a problem. That is the issue that faces us.
Okay, we have time for one final thought on that topic. Meirion?
I'm not going to answer the question because it strikes me as utterly absurd that Neville Eisenberg should be asking me about the direction of travel and strategy. So I'd like you to answer it.
Richard, any thoughts?
Well, let's think about Roger Martin quickly. He's got 5 key choices. So what's your winning aspiration? That absolutely is going to be, typically starts from the top. But everybody at different level will also have a winning aspiration too. Then you've got the choices of where to play, how to win. In other words, what are the strategies? What are the things you're really going to focus on? And then are they capable of being delivered, which is about the capabilities. And finally, have you got the systems to actually find the capabilities? Now, the whole process to me is iterative in the sense that, yeah, it has to be started off in one place, but it won't succeed unless at each stage, as many arrows go up as down.
Well, I think that's a great answer. Meirion, I've tried both. I think both can work, but in fact, they can only work in ways which reduces the difference between the two routes to an almost minimal difference. Because in the end, the leaders have to give that direction and inspire everyone to get involved. And if you try and do something which only involves the leadership and doesn't engage the workforce generally, then it's highly likely to be doomed, I think.